And now I request Dr. Aparna Ganguly from Royal Society of Chemistry to kindly introduce Professor Sarkar from IIT Kanpur.
Thank you, Vivek, and a very good evening to all of you. And I hope that you all are enjoying the talk as much as I am. So thank you to the organizers for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. And I think to take the program forward, I have been given the task to introduce Professor Sarkar, which I think he doesn't need an introduction. He's a very known face in the chemistry audience. But I think there's one just point that I probably need to mention is that he's an academic grandson of Acharya P.C. Ray and practicing scientist. So we are very pleased to have him with us here today. And he has a very diverse research interest from metalloproteins to nanocarbons. And I think he has contributed enormously towards water purification. And after heading the chemistry department at IIT Kanpur, he is currently at Department of Applied Chemistry, Ramakrishna Mission, Vidya Mandir, Belur Math. And not to mention that he has been awarded with a lot of prestigious fellowships globally and as well as from the Indian Academy of Sciences. I've had the privilege to hear to some of his talks in the past, and I look forward to this one as well. So over to you, sir.
Thank you. I must thank all of you to giving me this opportunity to talk something, a subject which should be dear to all of us. And this subject is something that where nothing is known. I mean, you cannot get much of the things because of the ancient India. And what is ancient India? I'm talking about the Indus Valley civilization and then the early Vedic period. The first question would be whether they are different or they are the same. There's no answer to that properly. So I thought it that why not to try to answer that whether the Indus Valley civilization and Vedic period, they are probably the same in different connotation. Now, how we can address this subject and then try to consider that how they act and to get these things. So let us, Now, there is a lot of connotation about the migration, where from we came. Where from we came, that is important. And the latest thing that we now accepted that the most modern human, they started, evolved some 130,000 years ago in Africa, and then they started to migrate for obvious reasons, for food and other things. And then they started migrating, and then they took 100,000 years to reach this part, and then entire year mark is there that how they travel. But we're fortunate in that sense that the entire globe you can see that they first landed to this land that is India. And when it is the interglacial period at that time, and that is the modern human ventured India some 100,000 years ago, and that is the Stone Age. It is related to that, the last quaternary glaciation around 110,000 years ago covered areas of northern hemisphere, including the Himalayas. Everything is ice. A recent publication is also there related to that. Such glaciation create the origin of the Arctic, home of the indigenous Aryanism. Now here I must restrict what we define. Why we define from Arya. Arya means Yoga, Sammanjanak and Mahan. We are not referring anything to superior race, nothing like that. It is Yoga, Sammanjanak, Mahan. And that is related to this thing is related to B.D. Tilak and M.S. Golwalkar in 1903. When glaciations ended some 15,000 years ago, and there is no more glacier, thus began the Vedic civilization during the Proto-Neolithic period, which is roughly 12,500 BC or 14,500 years ago, and that is precisely the 15,000 years ago. Yeah. Now, the settlement, the generation that is driven by common sense, that need-based science, how the settlement from north to west and to east, registering through the entire this period. If we look carefully, there is something important message here that I want to convey. The carved migration path here, down to Vinda Peninsula, showing the common lineage of the northern and southern people, based on combinatorial DNA mapping with genetic divergence. So, originally we are the same, but I'm referring to a time period of 100,000 years ago. And in that period, in between, several things happened. I'm not going to stress all these things. Now, here, about the missing of the Vedic river, Saraswati, that and tributaries, the missing thing, the missing valley. And it's important because some people, they map it with the radiocarbon tracing, not carbon, radio tracing of sulfur, sulfate, and some of the inorganic things deposit, which mainly one can get it from the river bed, and they could trace that this could be the lost bed of river Saraswati. I am particularly important giving stress to river Saraswati because it has been all the time referred to Rig Veda. So we have to take it for granted for the time being that there is definitely a river Saraswati and we have to trace it, and the civilization started from there. So I mean, I cannot throw it away that it does not exist, so it is all hoax, it is all imagination. It's not like that. So this is the Indus River, and this is the hypothetical or now it's lost Saraswati River. The distance between this is the 100 kilometers. So in the continuity, the cradle of Vedic civilization, that is as Saraswati dried up, so the onus rests to Sindhu River. So people talk about Sindhu River civilization because Saraswati is not there to claim that I am there. Anyway, so Sindhu Saraswati civilization sites discovered eastward from Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, eastward, here, in this way. You can see, because they are discovered later. There are several sites and the larger one, and it does not mean that they were not the original. So it is not that the continuity of that. So entire part is, this part is related to that civilization, and so it is telling you that is the bed east part of the ancient Saraswati River where one can see. The satellite image of Saraswati, the Paleo channel through Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, and that was the proof from ISRO satellite imaging. And that is the refute, it is no mythical map, it is Vedic, really Vedic sacred river do exist here. You can see the blue part there, it exists here. So major Vedic sites, all these sites, the Kalibangan, Rajasthan, Manawala and Rakigadi, Haryana, Dholabira, Lothal, lie along the river Saraswati. So many sites. So Sindhu, the blue trace that is still in existence, and the green is the lost trace of Saraswati. And this is the oval mark part where, if we quote about the hymn 10.75 praising rivers the Rig Veda, It describes Saraswati between Yamuna in the east and Satadru in the west. So this is the Satadru and this is the Yamuna. So this is the part where the Rigveda mantras or hymns were raised. So they define it. Once you have identified, then they define it here. They were there. And it's somewhere here, very near to that they said by themselves. So, the question now, their wide expansion, Mehergarh, if you trace the Sindhu River, it is on the bank, west bank in Pakistan now. There is one side, Mehergarh, and our is Rakhi Ghari. The distance is 800 kilometers, and in between two rivers, Sindhu and Saraswati, they separated by 100 kilometers roughly. Mehergarh to Sindhu River, 250 kilometers on foot. Rakhi Ghari and Saraswati River, 550 kilometers on foot. Why Vedic civilization flourished at the bank of Saraswati and not at the bank of Sindhu? That is the fundamental question. We talk about the Sindhu civilization is different, and our Vedic civilization is in Saraswati, which is lost. So there is no documentation of Vedic civilization. That's important. First, we have to document it, then we go for the science I have taken. So, it is something like that the periodic nomadic migration continued from the west, and the Sindhu settlers, they first got the onslaught of all the time from the west, this thrust. And then there was a fight. Those who survived, accommodated, defeated with work distribution, and importantly acts as human and river cell of the Sindhu, and allowed Saraswati settler to develop peacefully education, philosophy, everything. And so they could develop the science, education, everything more on the bank of Saraswati. The basic thing is that under the geologic time scale like stone, bronze, iron age, migration of Vedic Harappan civilization based on river settlement in this way, that Sindhu, Saraswati, Ghagra, Sarju, Yamuna, Ganga. Natural calamities like food shortage, earthquake, drying glacier, all these things slowly drift that the internal journey they had to travel, and then the time period of travel that one should, and the space. If this is the Sindhu and this is the dried Saraswati and this is the Ganga, this is 750 kilometers only, and it took a lot of years to travel. So that is nothing big deal that one can travel that thing. That Sindhu Saraswati Vedic civilization migration eastward finally flourished in the Ganges Valley. I am talking about it chronologically, that how slowly they moved in this direction, and because of the natural calamities. Now, if we look at the events, I mean, some people would be surprised, but being an Indian, I definitely prefer to get that this is the time, the pro-Harappan Rigveda. And this is the Ramayana time. And this is the Mahabharata with Saraswati disappeared. The movement could be something like that. It could be not like a straight line today that we do because of the other factors. The movement is something by arrowhead that they have moved in this way and this way and this way of the civilization. Okay, fine. Well, I should not waste time by reading these things. It's available. Before Big Bang, Rigveda posed a question about this. And this question is that it's still unanswered today, even. Only he knows, or perhaps he does not know. Who is he? We don't know. So, he is God? No. Or he is God? We don't know. So entirely think this type of metaphysical, philosophical question they could raise peacefully on the bank of river Saraswati. Now, the common sense, just the common sense to satisfy most important requirement to sustain life, food, shelter, and clothes, and they have then their laboratory open on this earth, water, fire, air, and ether. That's the Akash. So these are the things, materials. And this is the Sindhu barrier, and this is the Saraswati barrier, and this is the Sindhu-Saraswati duality. And from west, all the time, no one onslaught here, and they were first a shield, this, and the peace gradient here, and the metaphysical thoughts were possible only with the peace prevalent environment. So Sindhu-Saraswati Vedic civilization flourished here. They were basically, they have the good thing, all this modern life, everything compared to that time. But with a thought-provoking thinking and other things, it is only this part where the Vedic civilization. So they are not separated, they are continuity, they are the same. Now, need-based proto-science, after defining that what is, they are not separable, they are the same. You can think of that we can find signature left by them to understand proto-science when subdivision of science didn't appear in the scene. The division of science is only modern artifact and have no relevance to divide it like caste and creed as you do for no gain, but maybe for selfish attainment. So there's nothing like physics, chemistry, biology. There's science, need-based science. The lasting signature one can find in their lifestyle with pastime art signifying their emotion and activities as engraved in stone, daily used materials. And of course, these are their laboratory materials only. Fine. So the development of chemical science in isolation cannot be classified from the overall knowledge developed during the period 14,500 BC to 5,000 BC, representing Sindhu-Saraswati Vedic civilization ending with the Mahabharata war. Now we should appreciate some of the things they have done. Still, this time we use, I want to show that they have discovered some of the things, and then even today we use those things. Now, the science started to develop Vedic period term, Rasayana, that means the term Sanskrit is composed of two parts, Rasa and Ayan. Rasa means fluid or juice, Ayana means path. Ayan is path. So the path of juice. So the unique health drink, Soma Rasa, is the creation applying chemical knowledge from the available ingredients from there. And that is treated as Amrit. Its composition remains even unknown today. We don't know. The Vedic chemistry, science of fluid or rasa, performing art, Rasa Tantra, or chemical laboratories defined as Rasa Kriya Shala, they drive in search of Amrita and philosopher's stone. This is a very primitive science I am talking about, but nevertheless, for their survival, they try to develop this. The Rig Veda Hymn, one of this says, and the translation is that we drank Soma from fresh fruits, distillate like milk as Amrita for physical strength, achieve control over senses, become immortal. What our enemy can do to us, God, what even violent people can do to us. Now, a somatology, a science of human with a material substance, later developed, and I'm not going to do that part, that is Ayurveda. Professor Hosur elaborately mentioned about this Ayurveda, and that is a latter part because I'm restricted to till Mahabharata. But the question is that the same word, Soma, is all the time repeated in several hymns in Rig Veda, is a psychotomatic. What is psychotomatic? Interaction between mind and body. What is somatology? Definition, the study of the physical body. So that is something interesting that one has to think of. Now, that is yoga, and you have a signature. You have a tablet that you can. So that documentation is there. That yes, that is yoga and Padmasana. And so people believe that we do. We have discovered actually, we introduce yoga. Now, this civilization, evidence of the dentistry also, as back as 7,000 before Christ. They have used these things, how to get the modern type of repairment of teeth. Now, the elaborate urban system, it is all the time available everywhere. I am not going to take those things because the street, public park, temples, granaries, there are a number of all execution in so many sites that you can get it. But basic thing is that bricks, cement, mineral clay, tanning of leather and dyeing of cotton are practice. So that is important. This is something related to science. And I must not say that it's all chemistry, but of course, when they are materials, obviously it must be chemistry there involved. There are more than that. The interesting part of the thing that we could talk about the Bronze Age and Iron Age. It is said the Bronze Age is the first, not the Iron Age. We believe whether which is low cost, iron or copper and zinc. It is not in the cost. Is the ingenuity that they understood that the melting point of bronze is less than pure copper or iron. So they started with bronze so that they can easily get the access. And there are several other qualities of bronze, harder than pure iron and more resistant to corrosion. So, I mean, they have this type of ingenuity to distinguish between those things. Iron was plenty, but they didn't touch iron right from the beginning, but they started bronze. And then finally, probably, when there's a more need, then they go for iron. So the common sense said that the weapon and other things, the Stone Age, bone tools out of bronze, and then copper, and then follow through that way. Definitely there will be iron. So that is the part of the science. The gold ornament, rare, very rare, but they could find. Beautiful gold ornament that they can find, and the stone studded that one can see. Here also the jewelry, different type, but important part is the blue. This blue. This blue is some of the special pigments. They knew it and they are using this thing. And I want to show you later also. So these are all this pottery with the design and all this item jewelry, other thing that's the signature where you can get little bit of artifact with the part of chemistry also. Now, in the Saraswati civilization site at Lahiri in Hisa, you can see this green type of shade here, and mineralogy, fluorite mineral. The fluorite minerals are available in that part, and they have the beautiful color set. And they are mineral, so they are not going to give away with the weathering. So they're clever. They're clever. They use this type of thing. The other type of with the pottery and all these things that is normally we know, but nevertheless I put those things that they started with this type of thing, that the pottery, terracotta, the wheel, design with all these things, different type of things, and this type of miniature form of the chariot. So all this require chemical knowledge. I can put it in one place. That is the beads and ornament, pottery, seal, weaponry, and then terracotta, bronze casting, stone statues. They all required chemical knowledge. So they developed this type of chemical knowledge. Now the exploration of art working color. Prehistoric rock art of India, pen, color and weapon. This is Stone Age. Pre-Vedic civilization, the color and the art. Well, this Harappa art, the dress and pen color. So one has to try to understand this color they have created from the mineral, particularly which is lasting for so many years. That is important. Now, this is something design that people made it, what is the costume. And this is the style, but better is that here. Here the men, women predominantly left their upper bodies uncovered. It was in exceptionally rare occasion did people wear a robe across the shoulder. And this is the design. These are the design. These are the design that is important to note because these are made of ornament and of some material to wear. So these are related to cotton or something with the dress material. So you can have the style this way, and this is the drawn style, that this is the way that they draw. So all these things are related to chemical science. Here also the Shiva and Parvati, the style of the ornament and other things one can see. And another important interesting part of the next one, the polytheism that even today we do. Interestingly, Mark Twain, I thought that why not to quote this thing. India has 2 million gods and worship them all, religion. All other countries are paupers. India is the only millionary to worship God. That's a Mark Twain quote. So we have the Troika, Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara. Okay. Now I told you some times back that, well, the old things still prevalent. We do, even today, we retain this thing, the ingenuity, the grindstone, one can find. Even in our house, we have this thing. The wooden sleeper, most sacred. Even today, it is there. Brick mold is there. You can have a little bit of modern, but it is the same. So the civilization is carried over from 14,000 BC to 2020 AD. We are carrying it. This is the knowledge. Now, can anyone distinguish? This is the Vedic age ornament and this is the latest ornament today. The style, it is not changed, indistinguishable. That is important. Rig Veda, the problem is Rig Veda, the documentation. The people don't believe that we don't have documentation. Okay, we have Shruti. Vedic script noted about that normally the other people, they believe it is only 3,500. Before that, only Harappan script report some 6,000 with a tablet. But can anyone say that Rig Veda over 10,000 slokas can get documented in such tablet?
It's 6 o'clock.
Is it easy? No. So what did to write? How to write? Therefore, Shruti started. It is under compulsion that they started Shruti to communicate and preserve it. There is no way that it can write. There is nothing like at that time, no development of paper or anything. Here, the southern people, they claim that Tamil script is earlier than Sanskrit. We do agree. Why? The Tamils, they write it in palm leaves, and then that is something with the round design of the Tamil. And the palm leaf has got something that it can tear if the Devanagari script you write, which is a straight angular, and that can be completely torn apart. That is the problem, but they could get it. the Tamil script. So according to the ancient Indian wisdom, the Vedas are called Shruti, which means, and then we tried whether there could be something to get it. Yes. Bhujan Patra, the birch bark was available in Hindu Kush and Karakoram around roughly 5,000 meter high, glacier-laden western Himalayas, some 1,000 kilometer high, not from the Vedic spot. In search of that, and with the wooden stick pen, and using some ink like carbon soot with oil, it requires some time. So that is the time that one has to explore and one has to get, so that the time passed and one can get this thing and then started writing. So not the northern part, the writing is little bit late, and so it is only Shruti. Okay, I think I am almost covering everything covered, but there's one important thing that I want to say. You look this ugly picture in that sense. Excavation of Harappa site discovered skeletons scattered. The skeletons are not broken. No physically violent death. But peculiarly that people thought that 50 times they could get the radioactive level here high. And the government said that it should be closed. Now, where from the radioactivity came? I'm just posing a question. In the Mahabharata clearly describes such catastrophic blasts that rocked the continent. And whether something like that happened there? Where from the radioactivity came? So the Mahabharata and the Ramayana recount many examples that indicate our ancestor had knowledge of nuclear energy thousands of years ago. The description of weapons such as Brahmastra or Pasupatastra. Proper documentation and Indian science of today should investigate such aspects with modern scientific. Some sites are abandoned due to high radioactivity in Rajasthan. So I end that here. And should I chant that thing? Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Shabhirjang Karvabhahe Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahe Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, let us be together, let us eat together, let us be vital together, let us be radiating truth, radiating the light of life. Never shall we denounce anyone, never entertain negativity. Om, peace, peace, and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sarkar, for this putting this wonderful lecture for all of us here. And in the interest of time, I think we can just take one question, Vivek. Is that right?
Yes, one or two questions.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just very quickly go through. I think Ruchi Anand asked these questions. Why did Saraswati disappear? Is it possible Sindhu changed its course also in all these years and today it flows differently?
Yeah, precisely. Shruti, it is precisely so. It is slightly the courses change near Haryana up there. You can see the contributory river that I have shown there with the Ghagra and other things. It is somewhere the Himalayan, it's a young mountain. Sometimes it changes course, and so the entire glacier is changed the direction, and it is now giving it is pouring. Previously, it was pouring all water to Yamuna, and Yamuna was pouring it to Saraswati. Yamuna diverted from Saraswati, and so is the case that Saraswati started to pour to Yamuna, and then it is completely changed its course. There is another connotation. If someone visited that Mana village high up in the Himalaya, there is something that people say that Alaknanda and Saraswati is flowing, and then it is completely hidden. And there's a story of the Mahabharata that Bhima closed Saraswati because of something happened. They couldn't cross. But Saraswati is there, and it is changed its course. And so Saraswati is giving all the water, flowing all the water to Yamuna. And so in that sense, still the Sangam retains its meaning of the Trey River. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Sarkar, for that beautiful explanation. And I must also mention that there have been a lot of thank you messages for you in the chat box for the wonderful lecture today. Thank you once again, and over to you, Vivek, for the next session.